Welcome back to the studio. It's actually a really beautiful day here today. It's kind of a heat wave for it being still winter. So it's a beautiful day, bright and sunny. And I have been wanting to do this video for a while, but some videos take a little bit longer to get my ducks in a row than others. And they're finally in a row as far as I know. We, in a previous video, made this quilt. It really was a very simple quilt. It's a quilt that I have used in the past to teach kids how to sew, because you're just sewing, you take 4 strips and sew them together and subcut them to make each one of these rows. So this is 3 color groups, and then one width of fabric will give you the strips for the alternating rows. That video, I believe, was called Urban Sticks. And then in an additional video, we showed you how to use the Hobbs Heirloom fusible batting. And so this particular quilt has already been fused. It has the backing and the batting and the top all fused together. What's nice about that is when we go to quilt it, we don't have to have any pins in the quilt. So it's all ready to go as far as that, and it works really good in conjunction with the tearaway, which is what I'm going to be demonstrating today. The tearaway comes in packaging like this, and basically there are 3, well, I'm going to say 4 different types of pattern options. One of them I don't have represented here. You have the Dream Big panel, which would be 3 sheets in the package, and that would be enough to cover the entire Hoffman Dream Big panel. You would put the center one on first, and then you do the top and the bottom. The next category would be these borders, and then you have like an edge to edge, which could either be used as an all-over pattern or as a border only. So for instance, with this Pumpkin Fest Petite, we have the main design, which could be used as the border, and then the corner unit. So you get your 4 corners in here, and your strips would be in here for the border only. So that's one way you could use that. Another way would be just to use this package as a straight all-over design for quilting. And then you have block packages like this, which have blocks in it. So this particular one has 3 different block units. This is also part of the Pumpkin Fest. So if you wanted to do something a little more custom, you could do the individual blocks over the body of the quilt, and then use the overall and corner to do the border only. So you'd have the quilt bordered, and then the body of the quilt with designs. So there are several options available for using these. We'll show you how to find these on the website, but we also have a catalog specifically for the tearaway. This is available if you wanted to order one. We could mail it to you, and it has all of the different patterns available that we have at the moment. They're continuing to expand this line, so these will be added to as time goes on. One of the reasons that we developed this particular item was because people were asking for designs for domestic machine. There really aren't a lot of options for pre-printed quilting designs, either blocks, overall, or borders, or the Dream Big, that are adaptable for the domestic home machine. But this product is not just for the home machine. It could also be used on the long arm. We're constantly seeing where people have purchased a new long arm machine, especially the last couple of years. In-person classes are really hard to obtain, and people want to be able to practice on the long arm in front of the machine. Of course, we have over 5,000 designs for pantos that could be used in the back of the machine. Some people really like the experience of working on the front of the machine, and the tearaway work really good for that as well, because you place it directly on the quilt and you're just following the design to the best of your ability and skill level, and then you tear that paper away and you're left with a quilting design. What this does on both the domestic and the long arm machine is give you what they call muscle memory. That is giving your body the chance to get that eye-hand coordination, whether it's one machine or the other, and then you have something that you can tear off. No one's going to see what the original design was, and it just gives you a great level of practice, and it gives you the confidence to move forward. You wouldn't always need these for every project, but it is a tool that you could use to your repertoire. On that topic, I would also like to say that this is a single tool. It's not the only tool that you would have in your quilting vocabulary. On this particular quilt that we're going to be doing today, I'm not going to quilt the entirety of the quilt with the tearaway. What I'm going to be doing on these 3 strips, I'm just going to sew a straight line on both sides, pretty much trying to get in the ditch. I will use blue on the blue one, fuchsia, green, and then when I get to the point where I want to quilt these channels, then I'm going to go ahead and use the tearaway sheet. As you can see, the tearaway sheet has an echo design, just the way a regular Panto would, for overlapping the paper and getting them lined up piece to piece. In my case, because I'm only going to be quilting a single row in the channel, there's not going to be any interlocking on this design that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the paper on the dotted line, which is what you would also do if you were working on a border only. And then you can see how well this pattern fits in the space that I need it. I'm just going to use a single sheet in each row, and I'm going to alternate because I'm using 2 different patterns just to show you how they sew out. So my next step is to get the sewing machine loaded. I'm going to be using one of these 2 colors of purple in my bobbin for the back. And then I'm going to be loading the colors one by one and doing my 2 blue in the ditch, my fuchsia, and my green. And then after that, I will show you how I'm going to go ahead and get these papers attached to the quilt and get that started quilting with the tearaway paper. Again, it's a single-use product, so once you use it, you're going to tear it off and it will be gone. Any little bits that are left, when I'm finished tearing it off, I can just simply wash this and the little bits will wash away. So I'll show you that process as well. And I have a pretty good border of the backing that I'm going to use. Because this is a children's quilt, I'm not going to apply a traditional binding. This particular quilt I'm going to demonstrate, maybe not in this video, but at another time, how to just fold over the backing after I've trimmed it and use the backing as the binding. Now, this is not a technique that will create a great deal of longevity in the binding itself, but for a kid's quilt, which will get heavily used and the whole entire quilt may not last that long, it's a perfectly good procedure. And also it's something that kids could do. It doesn't require an enormous level of skill to perform. So it's one that works really well. It's very fast. So for a simple, quick project geared to younger people to both do or have, it's a great process. So I'm going to go ahead and set up all the things that I need to set up, and we'll get moving over on the domestic machine. We are at the Urban Elements website, and the reason we came to the website today is to show you how to find the tearaway designs on the website. If we go first here, I want to say I'm already signed into my account, and one of the reasons, there are many reasons for creating an account at Urban Elements. One of them is that you could maintain a wish list, which would be after you've spent time choosing designs or patterns, you could save them so you don't have to go back searching again. Also, when you purchase something from the website using your account, Urban Elementz keeps track of those items. So if you're downloading digital designs and you ever have a problem with your tablet or your computer, you can always come back and re-download the design. So it's always nice to have an account at Urban Elementz, and I've signed into mine. Looking for tearaway designs, I'm going to click on the header Quilting Designs here. And we don't have a specific tab up here at the top for tearaway, but you can do a subcategory search, and subcategories is here on the left, and I'll click on that and I'll go down to tearaway, and you can see at the moment Urban Elementz has 176 different patterns that are available as a tearaway. So I've clicked on that, and we'll wait for the website to click over. And then as we go down, you can see that there are roughly at least 5 pages of tearaway designs. And as you can see here, I have mentioned, there are some edge-to-edge designs, some block designs, and some corner designs. So in this particular case, you could use the Aquarius blocks. And if we click on that, I think you'll see that you have the option of the block digital, the block tearaway, or the block as a paper panto design. And you would purchase those in conjunction with the method that you wanted. So digital would only be for a computerized system. Tearaway is the single-use tearaway designs that we're going to be using today. And the paper is like a paper panto, would be reusable. So you could go ahead and add that to the cart depending on how you wanted it. You also have the edge-to-edge design here. And this is if you wanted to use the edge-to-edge design as a border. They also have a corner unit that would help you wrap that design around the corner. So we could just go through and look at some of the designs that are available as tearaways. Some of these are really, really, really beautiful, and something like this brioche, because it has nice gentle curves and they're varied sizes. If you were off a little bit on this, you wouldn't know after you tear that paper away. Brittle would be really great on a guy's quilt. I tend to like things that are more organic, where any mistakes would not show up. Bubble wrap may take a little bit more practice because of its uniformity. Canary also because of the curves and the variation in sizes would be a good one. The eye wouldn't catch any mistakes. We also have them for the Dream Big panels. In these packages, you would get 3 sheets for the Dream Big, one for the center and one for the top and one for the bottom. So it completely covers that Dream Big panel. And I believe there are 16 different patterns available for the Dream Big pattern. I've already pre-selected 2 designs that I'm going to be showing you today, if I can find them on here. These are some really cute feathered mola patterns. You can see in this block set you get a variation of patterns. Okay, here we are with Ginger Flower and Ginger Heart. Ginger Heart is one of the patterns that I'm going to be using today. I based it on the width of the design in conjunction with the width of the space that I need to quilt these in. So you can see that these were on sale because of the Valentine's Day, but that will have been over by the time this airs. But this is available as digital, self-print, and tearaway. and paper. This had the option of being able to print it at home using your home printer. Self-print is especially great for people who are overseas, where shipping might be an additional burden, or for people who are working and they need something immediately. They don't have time to have something shipped to them. So self-print is a great option. But today what we would be using is the tearaway. And I'm going to go back and show you another pattern that I'm going to be using in conjunction with this pattern today. Here it is. Halcyon. This one is digital, self-print, tearaway, and paper again. So you have all four options. And you can see here that there's even some instructions here on the website for how to use the tearaway. And so that's really helpful. If you need, you could download that directly from the page here. Click on it and save it. So that's how you find the patterns that you want. You could just keep clicking through that subcategory until you've seen all the ones that we have, but we also have the catalog that you could order and have that shipped directly to your house if you wanted to see them and off the computer. So I'm going to go ahead and head back out to the studio, and we will get started on doing some of the outline stitching. I'm just going to do some straight line stitching down the piecing before we get to the actual quilting, and I'll show you exactly step by step how that works. Okay, I've set up my station here to do some straight line piecing. I'm going to be sewing in the ditch. What setting up means for me is I still have my feed dogs up because I'm just going to do some straight sewing. I still have on my 1/4 inch foot because I'm not going to be doing any decorative stitch on these parts. I have isocord thread in my bobbin that is a dark purple color that will show through on the back. I have the dark blue set up to do this first section here. And I don't need gloves, I don't think, for this to feed through. I think we'll be fine just the way it is. I have picked out my other 3 colors, but I can go ahead and set those out of my way, and I can get this set up ready to sew. So the first thing I'm going to do is stitch in the ditch twice, one on each side of the blue. I may change out my 37 foot for a number 1 foot. Back in when I originally taught this, my Bernina had something that looked like a zigzag stitch, but instead of being points, it was small curves. And if you elongated that by increasing the stitch length, what you got was a wavy line. And I may do that straight line on the 2 sides and the wavy line in the middle. This batting would not require me to stitch that heavily, but it does give you a little bit of visual interest to have that little wiggly line, and it's something that the kids enjoyed watching happen as they were sewing, and it also looks good on the quilt. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. I've already done my bobbin. I have no pins in the quilt because it is basted with a fusible. Now this fusible is a wash away product. It washes away once the quilt gets washed, and it's not like super glue. It is have a little bit of give to it, but it works a lot better than having pins. And so I'm just going to go ahead and start sewing. Again, what I'm doing is to stabilize the quilt before I get to these tearaway design. my domestic machine. Basically, you just want to try and keep the quilt flat as you're going through. They do make a variety of gloves with little nibs on it that you could put on to help feed the quilt through. I adjusted my stitch length, I increased it a little bit. Also, I could put the walking foot on, which I might do after this pass, just because I have the walking foot. I know a lot of machines now have the dual feet built right into the machine. I have the old-fashioned walking foot somewhere in here, which I think I'm going to go ahead and put on. Maybe it's in my kit. And then we'll go ahead and do the walking foot will allow me to do the decorative stitch and the straight stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And notice that I did not sew beyond the top of the quilt because I want to be able to trim off the batting, and I don't want to sew over that or I wouldn't be able to trim it. So I'm going to do those couple things and then we'll start again. The reason my needle broke wasn't because I put on the walking foot. It was because I have on my straight stitch plate, which I have since changed. The last time I used the machine, it was for doing some paper piecing, and I wanted the straight stitch foot on there. So now I've got the machine set up again. I'm just roughly aiming for the middle of this line, and I can show you what that looks like in a minute. It really is just a wavy line. I'm trying not to talk too much over the machine. I know sometimes when the machine is running, you can't hear me as well. The machine sounds very quiet here in the studio, but I know with the microphone it picks up everything. And I'm going to stop before we get to the end and backtrack a little bit, and then I can cut my threads. Now I have done the stitch in the ditch on both sides of the blue and this wavy line down the middle. Now it's time for me to change the thread color and repeat that process with this variegated fuchsia color, and then I'll do the same thing with the green. I'm not going to make you stay with me for that because it's repetitive, and what we really want to do is get to the tearaway. In pretty quick order, I have these stitch in the ditch on each side of the 3 channels of pieced blocks, and I also did a wavy line. Now this whole piece is stabilized and I am a little less worried about moving it around on the machine. If you wanted to, you could also stabilize with a straight stitch around the whole perimeter of the quilt just to keep that flat. But I'm not going to do that at this time. What I'm going to do now is get the first sheet of my tearaway put onto the top, and I want to start in the middle and work out, because when I roll the quilt up to go under the head of the machine, it'll be easier to roll up if there's not an additional layer of paper here giving me some resistance. So I'm going to do the first one here, and then I'll do this one, and then the outer two. And I have two designs that I'm going to be using. I found two that we had some open packs from a show, and these were just demo packs, so I'm using these as my selection. You can see how they will fit into the allotted space, and I'm just going to alternate them. I'm going to do the ginger hearts and then the Halcyon, the ginger heart and then the Halcyon. But I'm only going to spray one of these on at a time. I think I'm going to start with this one so I can get these other two and put them aside. And now that the quilt is stabilized, I can go ahead and spin this around and then attach it with the 505. I'm just going to center this. This is the edge of the quilt, and I'm a little bit short. I could use additional papers and overlap the design and keep going, but I'm not worried about this little bit at the top and bottom. I can either, after I get done doing the whole row, continue doing the design. If I wanted to, I could trace it on this little piece of paper. But the whole point of this is to practice, and the binding is going to be attached here anyway. Even if I left this this space empty, this quilt will be heavily enough quilted that it will fulfill the requirements of the batting, and each batting is different. So I've got this where I want it. I'm just going to, you could either spray the paper or the quilt. 505 is a temporary spray adhesive, and depending on the climate you're in is going to determine how long you have to work with this product before it evaporates. It is designed to be temporary. Some people have said they've worked with it for a couple hours. Some people say it lasts a couple days. But again, it's going to depend on your humidity and heat level. But you can see now that is attached to the quilt. Once I tear this away and wash it, all the residue from the 505, well, the 505 will evaporate, but once you wash it, it certainly is gone. And it's the same with the fusible that's inside the fusible batting. That's also a wash away product. So once this is stabilized and washed, all of that is gone. So I have my first piece ready. I'm going to take this over to the machine, and I've made a few changes to the machine to get it ready to sew. So I'm going to get that done. Okay, I have on my quilting gloves. In this particular case, I don't have to worry about which way the quilt feeds through because I'm going to be the one moving it, not my feed dogs. I've pulled up my bobbin thread and I have my piece ready to go. So I'm going to start, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a curvy line here until I get up to, well, I didn't have my straight stitch on, so I have some weird things going on there. I was wondering why I couldn't keep track. Okay, so I'm at my start, and keep in mind I haven't done this in a month of Sundays. My goal isn't to be exactly on the line. My goal is more about trying to keep gentle curves. And so if I see myself getting off, I'm going to try and gracefully get back to the line. I hope you'll see by the time I get to the end of this first row that I would have gotten better at getting the line directly on the stitching.
I want to try and refrain from making quick, jerky motions. Try and keep as fluid as possible. I'm adjusting the speed of my machine. To match my skill level here. You want to be careful not to go too slow because then it's going to be hard to stay fluid. And the whole point of this is to build skill. So if you're not getting really beautiful curves right from the beginning, good. That means that you're on the process of learning. If you get to the end and you still don't think you're improving enough, just keep in mind that some of these people you see quilting have been quilting for 30 years or more. And you should only really be worried about your progress, not the progress of somebody else, or comparing yourself to somebody else's work. Keep in mind that even I have been quilting for 30 years, but this is not the kind of quilting that I do. And so it's going to take me a little bit of time to get that fluid motion back. But this is exactly why we practice. Remember that seeking perfection is the killer of joy. If I don't enjoy what I'm doing, then there really isn't any point in doing it. The nice thing about the design on the paper here is I don't have another variable of trying to figure out where to go next. All I have to do is follow the line that's been plotted out for me, and I will have a nice even quilting all over the entire surface. Right now my foot is pressed completely down on the foot pedal because I've adjusted the speed of the machine. Your body is going to go through a couple different learning processes because originally I think you start and you're trying to do all the motion of moving the quilt with just your hands. Once you relax your shoulders back and start using your whole arms, it feels like you get a little bit more fluid and you're not as tense. Excuse me. It doesn't look like I've improved much yet, does it? Well, I've got 3 whole more rows to go. You can always stop and reposition the quilt. You can stop as many times as you need. Seems like you'd have better luck with your hands directly around the operation of the machine there where the needle is, but sometimes I feel like I'm doing better when I'm back a little bit further. I just don't want you to think that because you get the design that you are going to be perfect as soon as you start. I think it's probably one of the most frustrating things for some quilters that they see so many other people posting absolutely incredible works of art, and they will go out and buy the same machine and they want the exact same results. But we forget just how many thousands of hours some people have been doing something. You really do have to get some practice in, and you have to allow yourself the freedom to not be good at something right away. If you really love something, it's okay to spend some time learning how to do it well. Even though I've been quilting for 30 years, I probably have not done free motion quilting on a domestic machine for over 15 years. And I think you can see that in my work here. Some of you might think, oh my gosh, he should be embarrassed. That's really bad. I'm not embarrassed at all. Any skill like building muscle memory is going to take some practice. Just like when you're doing a pantograph, what you're really looking at is not exactly where the needle's at, but where the needle's headed. You want to get the mind used to the idea that you're going to be making a curve, you're going to be making a stop, you're going to be making a point. And if you're only looking at where the needle's at, then your decision-making skills are going to be slowed down a little bit. Now here's where the paper ends, but I'm going to go ahead and just stitch off, trying to mimic some of the lines that we've already made. And because I'm not trying to follow the line, I'll probably do a little bit better at making curves. But this is just a skill that you want to practice and get good at. And so I've finished this whole piece. Not the best sewing in the world, but it isn't terrible either. And once I tear this paper away, you're not even going to know where I was off at. What I really want to focus on is being a little bit more fluid with my curves, not responding so quickly to trying to make corrections. And I'm going to switch over to the other design for this other center panel, and we'll see if I can get that one a little bit better. It may or may not happen, but that's what we're doing next. This particular pattern has a heart in it, which is a very recognizable pattern, and so mistakes will show up on this a little bit more readily even without the paper. But again, I just want to emphasize that why this was a good project. This is something that you could teach a kid to do. They could practice with this. It would be theirs. You could make it for a kid. They're going to love it because it's from you. And it's building skills. And if we don't ever start, we never are going to get to where we want to be. So I have pulled up my bobbin thread, and I can see where my start line is. Again, you can go as fast or slow as you want. If you have a problem looking at the paper and knowing which way to go, you could always make little notations with a little pencil telling you how to arrow off. But you can see I've slowed down quite a bit, and if that's what I need to do, then that's what I need to do. Again, what we want to avoid is making jerks to try and get back onto the line if we need to make a correction. Try and keep as fluid as possible. That's probably more important, way more important than just staying on the line. You will get better at this just from the beginning to the end of the project. If you have been doing some free motion work but without a pattern, you'll be better at this even than I started out being, because I haven't, as I said, done any free motion work probably in 15 years on the domestic machine. I've had a long arm for at least that long, And so I've been using my machine for piecing and not for quilting. You can see my hands are not right up against where the needle action is happening, and it's all going to depend on what you're comfortable with. So try a couple different positions, adjust the height of your chair if you need to. Make yourself a relaxing cup of tea. The last part I just finished was the worst one I've done so far. But what I want to focus on is my success, my failures. So I just want to remember that I do better if I slow down a little bit. So I want to keep focusing on what I need to do and not rush through the process. I'm not going to beat myself up because I didn't do a great part. I'm going to keep going to the end, but I'll probably edit this part out, and then we're going to go back to the Halcyon. As far as building muscle memory, it may not be a good idea to switch back and forth, but really what we're doing is tracing a line, trying to stay on the line as best we can without being hypercritical, and so we're just going to carry on. Okay, I've learned to slow down. I've learned that something's wrong with my needle. Okay, let's start again. I'm on my second row of the heart, and I've got it at the start point. I had to restart because my thread was bunching up. So I'm just going to go carefully beyond that portion. At some point you become comfortable with the machine moving faster than what you are. I haven't made any adjustments to my stitch length. There's none required for this product. The first time I did the heart pattern, I had the hearts upside down. Now I'm sewing them right sides up. And this is a skill that any good long armer will tell you that you need to develop, is to be able to sew the same pattern up, down, right, and left. When I get off of the line, I just try and gradually ease my way back over to the line without making huge course corrections. I'm working at finding out where my hands do the best work, stopping the machine when I'm going to change my hand position, or if I need to reposition the quilt. And one of the other important things is this. When I was younger, when I wasn't good at something right away, I would give up. The other thing that I might do, if I wasn't good at something, I would say, well, I'm not good at this, so I might as well just hurry and get it over with. And I would speed up rather than slowing down and trying to develop the skill. That was just because I was impatient. And I'm not saying I'm any more impatient now, but I do realize if I want to get better at something, I have to practice. I have to slow down, pay attention to what results I'm getting and why I'm getting them, and seeing what I can do to improve on that. The one thing I like about the tearaway is that because I don't have to be thinking about where to go next, the whole process, even if I'm slowing it down, is pretty quick. It only takes a few minutes to sew these whole rows out. And I'm not having to come up with a design, repeat the design evenly, because I'm just following what is already there. Knowing that if I can follow the line to the best of my ability, that it will be evenly quilted when it's finished. Some of my hearts and curls are going to be better than others. But it's also a testament that I was here. I was present at this moment. I know sometimes when you see a video someplace, the person will talk about something and show you a minute of it, and then they show you the end result. I know sometimes I show a lot. The point of it is because I want you to see the whole process. I want you to actually see the learning curve. And if you need to fast forward through a segment, that's fine. But I want that information to be there if you need it. These videos aren't meant to be magic, where I say, hey look what we could do, and then the next frame it's all finished. I'm going to have thread breaks just like you would have at home. I'm going to have to change the needle from time to time just the way you would at home. I'm going to have to change my bobbin out just the way you would at home. And I want to show each step so that you actually see what you're going to get. There's no magic to it. Just practice. It doesn't take any great intuition to see where I was really focusing my attention on the process and where I was letting my mind wander. When I'm focused on the project, I'm getting really good accuracy. When I start thinking about what's for dinner, where my friends are at, then I start getting off the mark. When you have those little segues where you're right on the line, it's very rewarding. But when you're not directly on the line, there's no point in beating yourself up because that paper is going to disappear. You can always see why I need the lines because my mind is just not that creative. So I have one left to do. It will be my other Halcyon. I've done my 2 ginger hearts. So I'll flip that around this way and get that one done. And the next part of the video you'll see me actually clipping or tearing away the tear. We have all 4 rows of the tearaway paper quilted, and I don't know if you'll be able to see any improvement. I know I started on this center heart and then I finished on this one. This one had a lot of inaccuracies and they were a little bit jerkier. By the time I got to the second pass, I had learned to sew down, and some of the hearts are actually sewn really nice on the design. Same with the other one. The center one was the first one. I finished on the last one, and I certainly did get better. This is not going to be a miracle product. You're not going to slap it onto a quilt and suddenly you're going to be an expert quilter. Everything takes practice, everything takes time, but this is something that allows you to do a wide variety of designs either on domestic or along our machine, but it's also a skill builder. This really helps you learn that muscle memory, eye-hand coordination, and to get designs that you wouldn't normally be able to do on your own if you're not incredibly talented in that regard. Now the part that
most people ask about is how you get rid of the paper. And this is something that you would do at a quiet moment. A lot of times, what I've done in the past, like when I did the Dream Big tearaway, is I brought the project in the house and I put on the evening news. And depending on the size of the design, you just go through and pick it out. If it sews over itself in areas like we did with the heart, some of those are going to take a little bit longer to get out. But and this is also a little sticky still from the 505. If I waited a day or two and let that 505 evaporate, this would be coming off even a little easier, because some of it is sticking because of the stitching and some of it is sticking because of the 505. The paper was designed to tear away. I didn't really have to make any major adjustments to my stitching because remember, this was free motion quilting. Basically we were going off the speed of the machine, not a stitch length. So what you would do is just get yourself a little pail, a little garbage can, or just go ahead and tear it and put it on the floor and scoop it all up after. This is also something that if you have kids or grandkids that they could certainly help you with, or if you have a husband that is wanting fed dinner, this is one way to get him to earn his dinner. Now, I'm not going to worry about getting every little piece out of the stitching. If it's a little piece, it's caught right down into the point of one of our design points, that will wash out. So I don't have to drive myself crazy with this. But this is the process. And you know, the larger pieces like the edge are certainly going to come off a little bit easier. And each design is going to come off a little differently than the one before it. It all depends on how close the design was. But basically I just scratch my finger over the pieces to get it to start lifting up. This is certainly much, I think, much thinner. You can see it sticking from the 505. I think this is easier than ripping out foundation paper if you're doing foundation piecing, but you may have a different opinion of that. But this paper was designed to tear out easily. Took us a while to develop that. It is one of the only Panto designs that I'm aware of that are designed to be stitched and torn away. So it does offer a wide variety of designs for long arm and domestic. So you can see in just a minute that I've gotten quite a bit off. And if you had the news on or your favorite evening sitcom, this would be finished probably in the advent of a single episode of the news or whatever. So it isn't terrible, and it is a great way to develop skill. Well, I didn't go inside. I didn't watch any news. I just took about 10 or 15 minutes and I peeled off all of the paper. You can see there's still a couple little pieces here and there, and I'm not worried about that because those will wash off. As soon as I put this in the washer and put it in the washer and dryer, all these pieces will just be gone. One of the things I wanted to say about this, and I kind of hear these comments all the time about people buying a new machine, either domestic or long arm, and they get frustrated very quickly because they don't have the skill enough to use it the way they see other people using it on videos. It's not when you buy a paintbrush that you become an artist. It is when you start using the paintbrush on a routine basis and practice, that's when you become an artist. Buying an expensive domestic machine is not going to make you an excellent piecer right away. Buying a long arm machine for a lot of money is not going to make you a fantastic free motion quilter right away. All of these things take skill, and the tearaway designs are one way to help you build skill. If you saw my work, you saw that it wasn't perfect at the beginning or the end, but I did improve. And this was one project, and I haven't done it in probably over 15 years. So don't get frustrated if you aren't perfect right away. Give yourself a break. Remember that you're just learning something new, and you're not going to be an all-star at it right away. I don't care if it's the Olympics or a musician, a painter, a quilter. Everything takes time. You have to put the time in, and you have to develop the skill. So we have all of the paper out. We have the two different designs, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the quilt or not, but this is a point that I could make. When you are learning to do free motion quilting, start off with low contrast quilting thread so that it doesn't stand out right away. If you look up close, you can see the quilting on here, but it's not evident from across the room. Once you become a master, then you can start using high contrast thread, and you can really show off your work. But even a lot of the long armers who have been quilting for a long time will use thread that matches the background. They use low contrast thread, and that helps hide any imperfections in our quilting. So the next thing I'm going to do with this, and I'm not going to do it right now, is to trim the backing by carefully folding it. And I'm going to trim it to a specific size. We'll talk about that when I do it. And then I can show you how to fold over the binding and stitch it down so that it's the back folded over and not a separate binding. So we'll do that next, and well, we'll do it next. As I've said, I've got the quilting finished on this small little lap size quilt. And the last thing that I need to do is I want to very, very carefully trim away any excess batting, and if I need to straighten up just the tiniest bit of the edge. And then I'm going to trim the backing so that it is a size that I could fold over twice and bring around to the front of the quilt so that I don't have to add a separate binding. Now, you really have to be careful at this point, because if you make a mistake and cut through the backing as you're trimming, then you're going to have to remove the whole excess backing and just put on a standard binding. And that's not what I want to do today. So as you can see, I have the backing here and a little bit of batting in the top. I'm going to bring the camera in closer so you can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to try very hard to be careful enough to cut this in a way so that I don't make a mistake. One of the problems that I have when I'm filming is that I'm trying to concentrate on too many different things at the same time: lighting, sound, camera angles, and I mess up something that I'm doing, either cutting the wrong size strip, or in this case, hopefully not cutting the back. So I'm going to move the camera and watch this little step, and then we'll keep moving. Okay, you can see my backing, batting, and my top, and I want to fold under this backing as far away from the top stitching as I can. If I need to, I should even remove a couple stitches if in any place that is not folded under enough to trim the edge. And you can just keep lifting up the fabric to see. In the case of trimming or not trimming, if you only have a tiny little bit of the batting sticking out, you could just leave it go and not even worry about it, because you could get it folded up in the backing piece as you're pulling it over. So it will just kind of fill up the binding as you go. If at any point I cut this and I get a little sliver of backing, I'm done. So I really want to be careful. I'd rather leave a little batting than cut my backing. So that's one side down. And I'm going to go ahead and do this all the way around. Since I've already shown you once, I'm going to turn the camera off, hoping that without the camera I can be as accurate as possible. And then I'll show you the next trimming step. Okay, ideally what we should have now is our top and our batting that is almost invisible. You can see a little bit here, but that's going to get caught up in the binding. And then our backing fabric. The next thing I need to do is trim the backing fabric to a consistent size from the edge of the top. And I did a little bit of math in my head. Normally when I do binding, I do French fold bias binding. So I cut 2 3/8, but let's just say for simplicity, I cut 2.5. So you take the 2.5 inch strip and you fold it in half, and you sew that on the edge of the quilt using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because the 1/4 inch seam allowance goes through two pieces, both folded edges, you're losing 1/2 inch. So your usable binding now is down to 2 inches. And because it's already folded in half, and then it gets folded again, you're basically dividing your 2 usable inches into 4 pieces. So that leaves us 1/2 inch. So if I take my strip, since these are not going to be doubled, well, quadrupled really, I'm going to cut 1 inch away from the edge of my top. When I fold that inch over and then over again, what I should have is approximately 1/2 inch of a binding. So that's how I'm going to do it. So now I'm going to cut 1 inch away from the edge of my quilt, knowing that it's not going to be absolutely perfect, but again, this is a beginning technique and we're not seeking absolute perfection at this stage. So I've got my 1 inch line on the edge of the top of the quilt. And I know it looks small, but what we'll be doing is ironing this over and then folding this over again and top stitching. That's the process. So I'm going to continue cutting this 1 inch strip very carefully all the way around the perimeter of the quilt, and then I'll show you the next step. As you can see, I still have some little pieces of paper tearaway on my quilting, but I want to go ahead and get this binding on before I throw the quilt in the wash, just so I don't get any unsightly raveling. I have my backing cut 1 inch away from the edge of my quilt. Now you could do this whatever size you're comfortable with. This is just the size I chose. And what I'm going to do first on all 4 corners, I'm going to do a little tucking on the corner so that when I fold my edges over, I actually have a mitered corner. So at first, I'm just going to fold the corner over, meeting approximately the edge, the corner of the quilt. So I have my backing corner kissing my top quarter. And if you want, you could even use a little bit of a glue stick just to keep that together while you're working on this process. I'm just going to give that a little press down. Now you can see that my piece is still, the edge here is still about 3/4 of an inch away from this edge, which I do not want. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue stick on this top piece. And this time I'm going to fold this over so that the edge is almost completely lined up. This line is right up almost exactly to the tip. And you can see I'm going to do the same process of folding this in half and then this in half. And when I get both corners done, you will see that I will have a mitered edge there. And when I top stitch, I can also go ahead and top stitch both of those lines right out to the corner. So I'm going to repeat this process on all 4 corners. I've got the glue stick and the iron to make sure that stays. And I'm just going to go ahead and repeat this. I have my first fold here. I have used a little bit of a fresh glue stick just to help keep it stuck down. I don't mind the glue stick at all. I'm going to do it again. Put a little bit of glue stick. You may not see the point of this, but I like the way it's helping me hold this in place. And I want to spend a little bit of time making sure that my miter here is right in the corner. And then I'm going to go down and get this folded over right at the very edge. So now when I top stitch here, I will have that double folded backing. And on the opposite end here, I also want to make sure we're really getting that nice mitered corner as we can. If this is a little bit wobbly, that's fine as long as we top stitch it good, right in place. You can adjust it as much as necessary. And if you don't want to use a glue stick, then you could also use little clips like this. People a lot of times will use these for doing binding. And you can work your way. I'm going to do both of my top and bottom ends first, and then I'm going to do the side. And I'm just going to keep going in this method until I have all 4 sides done. Now you could actually do the top and bottom starting right there at the miter or coming in from the corner and sewing straight across and back out and doing all 4 sides separately, or you could get them all ready and go to the sewing machine and just zip all 4 sides in one motion all the way around the edge of the quilt. Now that I have the backing ironed over, I folded it over twice to the front. You could just give a check to the back to make sure there isn't anything out of the ordinary before you sew it down. And then it's just a matter of choosing a corner and starting off. And as I said earlier, you could come in at the very corner down to where the miter ends and around and do each side, or you could just do a little back stitch there. I think I'm going to start at the very miter and make sure that gets tacked down on both sides by doing all 4 sides separately. You may have noticed that I put my walking foot on. Since I took all that time to dig it out, it will make this a little bit easier. And the trick is just to be as patient as possible as you're sewing. We want to sew as close to the edge of the backing fabric as possible without going off. If you do go off, just go ahead and backstitch over it. A seasoned quilter may look at it and notice where you've had to backtrack, but I can promise you your great-granddaughter or your neighbor's kid or your nephew is not going to notice that. Well, this should conclude this complete project. We used the fabric from Urban Elements to make our batik strips and made our basic strip quilt just using 2.5-inch strips. I had one piece of fabric for the batik, which I just cut into 4 equal sections, and those became the alternating rows. We stabilized the quilt with Hobbs fusible batting to make this ready to use on the domestic machine. Then we stabilized in the ditch on the pieced strips and put a wavy line down the middle. And then I used the tearaway quilting designs from Urban Elements. They come in either the Dream Big, corners, blocks, or the edge to edge, which is also a border. And I utilized 2 different patterns on there, Ginger Hearts and Halcyon. So you can see overall, we get a lot of beautiful texture. It's a great way to practice your free motion quilting on the domestic machine. The tearaway could also be used on the long arm machine to practice being in front of the machine. The skill level that I have is not going to translate to you one way or another, up or down. I haven't done free motion quilting on the domestic in probably 15 to 17 years, so I was rusty, but I did see an improvement in from the start to the finish, but I could also see that I need more practice on that as well. Then we finished off with just using a wrap and round binding. The back is just wrapped around and top stitched on the front. It is folded over, so it is a double straight grain binding, and if that ever failed, all we would have to do is trim that off and we could put on a conventional binding on this particular project. You can see I still have a couple little pieces of paper. Some of it is still stuck because the 505 is still holding on, but also now that the binding is on, I can go ahead and put this in the washing machine and all of these little pieces will just wash away. So I think that's it for me today. I have another project I need to film this week, so I'm going to put this one away, and I've got my washing machine full of stuff for upcoming projects that I'm really excited about. So thanks for stopping by. I know this was a lot of process for this particular video, but thanks for staying with me, and I look forward to seeing you again next time here in the Urban Elements studio.